welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Andrew Kloss for sending in some awesome pictures of his Cadian Rusted Guard. Trust in Rust. I absolutely love the theme of this army. It looks fantastic. Really effective weathering done on all of these vehicles. The only thing I would say, Andrew, is I see a couple of unpainted guardsmen there. You know, you've got to get on that, buddy. The Emperor does not smile favourably upon unpainted guardsmen. But the vehicles look absolutely fantastic. I would love to play against that, and I'd love to see it on the tabletop. Thank you for sending these pictures in, Andrew. If anyone else has got any cool pictures that they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page. There will be a link down in the description below. Anyway, without further ado, let's get on with today's video. Now today, guys, what I want to take a look at is the announcement made by Games Workshop that all weapons are basically going to be getting bigger and better and more powerful, and how that is both a benefit for the guard but also how it may be affecting us negatively. Now this isn't going to be a rant or anything about the general, the game's getting more lethal or anything like that. We're not looking at that today. That might be in a future video. We're purely looking at today the objective fact of where these weapon changes will benefit guard and where they will potentially punish guard. So for those of you that aren't aware, Games Workshop put up an article end of last week that basically said, you know, heavy bolters are going to be getting, you know, damage 2, flamers are going to 12 inches, and there's loads of others. And what we're going to do, guys, we're going to go through sort of the 4 or 5 key points that was raised in this article and analyse it from the guard's perspective. So the first one that we're going to take a look at is the heavy bolter. Now, the guard has access to a lot of heavy bolters. Every vehicle basically comes with one. So anything that changes the heavy bolter does have quite the effect on the Imperial Guard. And the principal change with the heavy bolter is that it's now going to damage 2. So that's really interesting. That is, you know, the good thing about that for the guard is, like I said, guard can spam heavy bolters like no tomorrow. We're very fortunate. We're one of the few factions that can just slap 3 heavy bolters on our main battle tank. You know, even Marines, if you look at something like the Predator, which I know is sort of the firstborn main battle tank and not a Primaris one, but still, that thing gets 2 heavy bolters. Most of the time when you're slapping, you know, when you're giving your vehicles heavy bolters, you're able to give it sort of 1 or 2. With the guard, it comes with 1, and you can get it up to 3 heavy bolters, no problem. If you look at Forge World, even your Chimeras can take 3 heavy bolters. So we can really spam these things. You know, we can really spam them. And them going up to damage 2 is really interesting because it gives us a few more anti-Primaris options. So in the past, it was plasma for days, simply by the fact that it was damage 2. The AP -3 was nice, but with there being a lot of invulnerable saves or cover saves or various other saves that you can get on, you know, and whatnot. The reason you were really taking it was that, you know, if it's got through the various barriers that you know, that saves that can be thrown up by Marines, you just slot one of those Primaris. You just die. And you know, one of the main things that Primaris were paying for was the fact that they've got 2 wounds. You know, they get the extra wound and the extra attack. Well, now if you're heavy, you know, and when you take that that sort of 2 wound buff away from them, they really feel it. In fact, Primaris are extremely durable because they have 2 wounds and power armor, and so you sit them in cover, and suddenly, you know, they're on a 2-up save, and they're on 2 wounds. Small arms are just really ineffective against them. However, if we have access to damage 2 heavy bolters, things are starting to look up. I mean, Imperial Guard, we have access to the Astra Path, so we can remove cover. So those Primaris boys are going to be on, you know, their basic power armor save. You slam a heavy bolter round into those guys, there's a 50-50 chance that they're going to die. And it's cheaper than trying to do the same thing with plasma cannons. So plasma cannons are 20 points on a vehicle, and heavy bolters are 15 points on a vehicle. So you can get four heavy bolters for the same price as 3 plasma cannons. So you're going to get 3 extra, like you get a whole extra weapon system. Now if we do just a quick bit of napkin math hammer here, just do it on the fly, you take your 4 heavy bolters, that's going to be 12 shots. You take your 3 plasma cannons, on average that's going to be 6 shots. So that's double the damage, double the number of shots. Okay, so in 40k, 9th edition is kind of, messing with this a little bit, but the general rule is, more shots, more bueno. More shots are just better. More shots equals more casualties. Now that doesn't always necessarily mean that in 9th, because so many things are getting extra wounds and more durable. So now in 9th, I would say it's not more shots equals better, it's more damage equals better. Like that, flat damage is king. Flat damage through weapons are going to be really powerful. So the heavy bolter going up to that flat damage 2 is very 9th meta. It's a little like at the beginning of 8th edition when the regular heavy bolter was very meta, and I always argued that all the way through 8th the heavy bolter remained very much a good heavy weapon because of the way it sort of abused the strength mechanics of, it's always going to wound even a knight on 5s, and it's never going to wound anything worse than a 3 pretty much. So the fact that they now have damage 2 is extremely good, because we're seeing these elite infantry on the rise, and so you need as much flat damage 2 weapons as you can get your hands on. Now if we just quickly continue that bit of math hammer, you've got 12 heavy bolter shots. Let's say it's a tank. Let's say it's a regular Lehman Russ, regular guard hitting on a 4+. You're going to get 6 hits. You're going to get 4 wounds, and then the Primaris are going to fail 2 saves. 2 dead Primaris. That's 40 points. You kill 3 Primaris. You do that another turn, you've got your points back and change for your heavy bolters. So, not bad. Do the same thing with the plasma cannons. You're going to get 6 shots. You're going to get 3 hits. And then they're going to get only a 6-up save. So, you should kill 2 as well. Okay? So, against Primaris now, against basic Primaris infantry, just standard, 3, very meta 3+ save, 2 wound infantry. The heavy bolter now is just as good at killing it as plasma. Now, what is going to be interesting is when you start firing these things against vehicles. Okay, because in theory, the plasma is. Oh, well, the plasma, no, because the plasma wounds on, I should say it's overcharged. It's going to get 3 hits, but then it's going to wound on 2s. So the plasma might kill, you've actually got a good chance of the plasma killing 3 Marines, haven't you? Ooh, that's interesting. So the plasma is actually potentially better at still killing Primaris. Okay, what about you throw that against vehicles? It's going to be, against vehicles, then it'll be 2, which will be 4 wounds against a vehicle. Or it'll be 6 hits, it'll be 2 wounds, it'll be 2 damage against the vehicle. So, interestingly, just doing a bit of the math hammer there, whilst heavy bolters are better against Primaris than they were, it actually still looks like plasma is going to be the best option. Which is good, because, I have a lot of plasma, and I heavily invested in plasma over 8th edition. Now, what I would say is that we are very fortunate in the Imperial Guard where we don't really have to choose between one or the other. We can have both. So, for example, in our infantry squads, you take a plasma gun and a heavy bolter, and that's 15 points, because the plasma gun on an infantry squad is only a 5-point upgrade, and the heavy bolter on an infantry squad is only a 10-point upgrade. So for the price of 1 heavy bolter on a vehicle, you can get a heavy bolter and a plasma gun on an infantry squad. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So yeah, we don't have to pick in the guard, fortunately. So whilst I would still, looking, do a bit of napkin math, Hammer, please tell me if I've made any mistakes down there. Just put it down in the comments. But from my quick back of fag packet math hammer, it looks like the plasma-based weapons are still better than the heavy bolter at killing Primaris, but it's still good to have that boost. Anyway, moving on to flame weapons. Actually, no, we won't move on to flame weapons just yet. So that's the good thing about heavy bolters. Okay, that's the good thing about heavy bolters for guard. The bad thing about them is, what if we're on the receiving end? If we're on the receiving end of a lot of heavy bolters, our vehicles are going to be getting creamed. And so this is something that's really interesting. I just want to mention this quickly, but increasing the damage of a heavy bolter when it comes to the guard basically makes it better at killing our vehicles, but has no impact on what it can do to our infantry. Our infantry are only one wound infantry. So it's I found that really interesting, and I think so. From a bad perspective, it means that now all it takes is 6 heavy bolter shots to get through your Leman Russ's armour and it is dead. Or if it's an Imperial Fist heavy bolter in the Devastator Doctrine, it's just 4. Just 4 heavy bolter shots. Which they could do. They could definitely do that. A squad of Devastators with a couple of Armorium Cherubs has a good chance of just smashing through that Leman Russ. I mean, what's that? 18 shots. They're gonna have a chapter master because it's Marines. They're gonna have a lieutenant because it's Marines. So they're gonna hit with 12 of those shots, re-rolling everything. They're gonna hit with 16 of those shots. Then they're gonna wound on 5s. So they're going to at least wound with 5, and they're re-rolling 1s, so they'll probably wound with 6? 6, let's say 6. And then because they're in the Devastator Doctrine, the AP -2, so your Leman Russ goes to a 5-up save, so 4 go through, that's a dead Leman Russ. So now, the heavy bolters, with just a modicum of support that isn't tax support that the Marine player will be taking anyway. A single squad of Firstborn Devastators can ice a Leman Russ tank commander in one volley. That is tough. That is really tough. But against my guard infantry, no different. So just think about that for a moment, guys. Just consider that. Now, moving on to the next one system, we're going to look at flamers. Basically, flamers and heavy flamers, and I imagine all flame weapons over time, are moving to a 12-inch range. This is just good. This is just all-round good for the guard. Very few downsides, because guard principally are a shooting faction. So what it means is that we can now, when we get charged on Overwatch, doesn't matter how far away the enemy is, because a lot of Marines, they can charge from 9 inches away, but between various buffs and characters and stratagems, they can get up to a 6-inch rollable charge or something crazy. So they can ignore the fact that maybe you've got a veteran squad like a heavy flamer in there, or a vehicle with 3 heavy flamers. Now they can't ignore it. Now it is very worth putting heavy flamers on vehicles, putting flamers in squads, because it means if someone charges you, 1 CP, get that Overwatch stratagem going, and that flamer will always be having a good time. On the other way of looking at it, not from a defensive perspective, but from an aggressive perspective, deep striking, flamers, they're in business now. So Scions, this really boosts Scions. This is a big boost for Lambden Lion Scion players, because you can take a big, take a command squad, put 4 flamers in it, deep strike into flamer range, and you don't have to use the Valkyrie stratagem, which lets you do it. The only other way you used to be able to do it is with one of the stratagems that let you deep strike within 5 inches. Now Scions can just deep strike, flame, land on lines, AP -1 on all those flamers. They're having a great time. They're having a really good time. You know, it's the same with anything. You know, special weapon squads coming in from outflank, flame. We talked about in a previous video how Guard can find it really easy to just outflank a lot of special weapons, no problem. 3 special weapon squads can now outflank. They don't need and maybe a couple of and at least 1 command squad. That is going to be what, 13 flamers. You just outflank them all for 1 CP, and they're all in range. That's a lot of flamers you're going to be cooking with gas. Now, the only bad thing I would say about this is that flamers are okay. Heavy flamers are really good, but flamers are okay. The problem with flamers is that they are, you know, the damage 1 weapon, and we're in a meta now where damage 1 just sucks. Like, it's all about, you know, every marine model is basically getting +1 wound. You know, Terminators, Tactical Marines, every marine model is getting +1 wound. So anything that only does 1 wound isn't really going to touch the sides of, you know, one of the best armies out there. You know, in fact, is the best army out there. I mean, you know, Marines are getting another boost. We're not going to get into this now, guys. It's fairly obvious that Marines didn't need a boost, but they are getting one. And so Games Workshop is, by doing that, is signalling to the community that elite infantry is powerful, and that is what we want 9th edition to be the focus on. 8th edition, for a time, was great for hordes. Great horde meta, horde armies had a good time. 9th edition, they're like, we don't want to encourage hordes anymore. We want 9th edition, the distinct takeaway from 9th edition, that feeling to be an elite, smaller scale game. Flamers don't really work well in that meta, sadly. In fact, from a negative point for the Guard, Flamers getting a boost doesn't really help us kill those multi-wound models, but it means that the people using those Flamers are going to have a much better time killing our 1-wound infantry. So, good and bad. Good and bad things to be aware of. So the next one that we want to look at is Melter. Okay, now Melter is changing significantly. Now, before I even go into my analysis, I'm just from a rules mechanic point of view, I think that the way Melter has changed is better. Okay, yeah, it'll probably be worse for Guard overall, but the way Melter works now is if you're in half range, you just get +2 damage. Okay, just +2 damage, which is really good because Melter should never do less damage than Plasma. The problem with Melter in 8th edition was that it was more expensive, but there was always that risk that, well, it had a 33% chance of doing less or the same amount of damage as a plasma gun. Okay, and it only had a 66% chance of doing more damage than a plasma gun. But the trade-off was that you had to get much closer to use it. So in the long run, when you take into account that the plasma gun can, you know, can do 2 shots at close range and do 1 shot at long range, and over the course of the game, plasma was just doing more damage than Melter. Now, if you go in half range, that plasma gun, that melter gun is just going to do, is always going to do more damage than a plasma gun, which is great. Well, saying that, let's just think about this. A plasma gun fires 2 shots, so has the maximum potential to do 4 damage, where a melter gun has 1 shot with a minimum. I think it's the same, you know. I think it's the same situation. No, it's not, because Melter is better now. But Melter now has a yeah, again, Melter is better. It's in a good position. It's in a better position, but I still think there is a risk that 1 Melter shot will not do as much damage as 2 plasma shots. So it still is that risk. But at least now it has the flat damage potential. So if we just take a look at that, what I've been saying consistently on this video, what is this meta all about? It's all about elite infantry. What is the key to killing elite infantry. Flat damage, multi-damage weapons. Melter now is a flat damage, multi-damage weapon. It's good for the meta. It's good for beating the meta, I should say, as a guard player. Just anything that gives us the ability to just do multiple wounds every single time is a good thing. No doubt. And multi-melters are going up to heavy too. Now, multi-melters are very expensive. They're what? Is it, I feel like they're like 25 points per multi-melter on a vehicle, something mad. I'm sure it's something mad as like 25 points. But we can take a lot of them in the guard. You know, every Leman Russ can take 2 multi-melters. So that's good. It also kind of, you know, a lot of people have been crying foul over, you know, Space Marine Eradicators and the fact that they get, you know, 2 shots and all this stuff. Well, now units like Sister Battle Retributors, for example, they also get 2 shots, but they can split their fire as much as they want. So I like this melter rule overall because I like the multi-melter change overall because I think it was a necessary change, because otherwise those Eradicators were just stupidly broken. I mean, they still are. And again, looking, you know, we've seen this from a good perspective. It allows us to kill those multi-win infantry better. The bad perspective being that now, you know, a single melter shot can do 8 damage. So, you know, in those, you know, referring back to those aforementioned Eradicators, they are going to be slagging tanks left, right, and centre. They get in half range. Think about this. They've got a 24-inch range. Getting within 12-inch for half range isn't that difficult because it's a smaller board size. They get 6 shots. Okay, now they're going to get 4 hits. They're going to get 2 wounds. They've done a minimum of 6 damage because they get flat 2, and then plus, you know, they're doing a minimum of 3, aren't they? Because it's 2 plus d6, so minimum of 6 damage. So they've crippled your tank. You know, they've already. Let me just double check I'm not speaking out of my bottom, but they should have already just killed. Yeah, so 4 to 6 wounds for Leman Russ. So in one volley, statistically, they bracket your Leman Russ. Minimum bracket that Leman Russ. Okay, now on average they're going to do 3.5 damage on each d6. That's a 7. So plus 4 from the flat damage. So on average they will do 11 wounds to a Leman Russ. 11 wounds. So those Eradicators, you know, take into account, you could use a command point to try and improve it. Those Eradicators have essentially can very easily pop a Leman Russ tank commander in one go. You know, fire a bit of small arms at it, clink a wound off, send in the Eradicators, kill a Leman Russ tank commander, and they've got a 24-inch range. They've got a 12-inch good, you know, melter range, so they're good. They're going to do it. So when a 120 point unit of Eradicators can kill a 225 point Leman Russ tank commander, you know, with all the plasma, standard sort of max plasma loadout, that's pretty gnarly. Now, to be fair, Eradicators are designed to kill tanks, so if they are points efficient at killing their intended target, can't complain too much. But it does just show how good they are at their job and how much, you know, how much of a potential impact this is going to have on us as guard players. Basically, I'm not saying, you know, don't take tanks. What I'm saying is be aware of how fragile your tanks are. Not fragile is the wrong word. How a little bit of poor positioning will lead to your tanks being destroyed very quickly. So screening, pushing out, taking board control will be very important to counter the melter meta that I see us entering into. So moving on, Well, we'll actually do this in a slightly different order. So we'll go quick change to plasma weapons. So overcharged plasma will only ever overheat on a 1 now, unmodified 1. So none of this -1 to hit means a 1 or a 2 kills you. No. So Games Workshop is just moving slowly but steadily towards, you know, unmodified dice rolls, so unmodified 1, unmodified 6s. This is another great step in that direction. In some ways it's helpful for Guard, in some ways it's bad for Guard, but overall it's better. That is just great. There is no real downside to Guard for that because we have access to very little -1 capabilities. You've got a bit of terrain and a psychic power. But we don't really have access to a lot of -1 to hit shenanigans. We're often the army that gets done over by -1 to hit modifiers. So now that our those plasma tank commanders can just overcharge for days. So plasma's going to have a great time. So that's just a quick one. That's a good one. Last one to mention, interesting one to end on. It looks like melee weapons are getting a big plus. So power swords in general seem to be getting a +1 strength modifier. That is a biggie for Guard. That is a biggie because your basic Guard with a power sword now has the ability to wound Marines on 4s, and it means Catachans with power swords have the ability to wound Marines on 3s. Wow. That is a biggie. That means putting power swords on your Catachans. It's only 5 points. That is a worthwhile upgrade now. That is really good. What I really like about this power sword increase, what I think is so important, is that it removes that bad taste you get in your mouth when you pay for a power sword and then you just come across an army that has loads of vulnerable saves. Because I've mentioned this in a few battle reports and I've joked about it, but in that situation, back in 8th edition, if you paid for a power sword, then you got into combat someone with who had a 4+ armor save, or like a 4+ invulnerable save. You were essentially paying 5 points for a downgrade, because at least the chainsword gave you +1 attack. So there were many 8th edition. There definitely was a problem with invulnerable save spam throughout that edition, and so it made putting power swords on a lot of people a waste of time, and it made me think when I'm redoing my Mordians, I like painting them up power swords for WYSIWYG, but I don't like it because it means that there's a lot of scenarios where I'm paying 5 points for a kick in the teeth. Now that's not the case. Now no matter what scenario I find myself in, I will always have the benefit from having a power sword. If I have a power sword and I go against, last Mordian battle report I had was against the Dark Elder. If I, in that battle, my power swords weren't very helpful because the witches have got a 4+ invulnerable save. Now it's like, okay, witches have got a 4+ invulnerable save, but now my power sword guys are wounding them on 3s. This is great. This is really, really good. The +1 strength is just so good. I mean, going back to the Catachans just for a brief moment, just think about this. Power sword Catachans now can wound knights on 5s. And knights don't get an invulnerable save in combat, which means your Catachan sergeant, who has 2 attacks base, +1 for Strachan, +1 for a priest, has 4 attacks, which could potentially put that knight down to only a 6-up save. That's pretty good, and you can spam power swords for days. And what I quite like about this is the idea of the sort of mini Marbo, the mini Sly Marbo. Take a Catachan platoon commander for 25 points, give him a power sword, 30 points, run him into something, and he has 3 attacks base because he's an officer, +2 for Strachan and a priest, and he just runs in there with 5 strength 5 attacks and starts hacking people to pieces. And then you're like, oh, interesting. If I get stuck in combat, guess what? I'll order myself fixed bayonets and do another 5, do an extra 5 power sword attacks in combat. You know, when you're fighting over objectives, you don't want to fall back. That's really powerful. So I see Katacham mini Marbos as a really interesting tactic, and I'll probably do like a 5-minute quick tip tactical on that as like a full video, and we'll, you know, explore the options there a bit better. But you know, just gives you an idea of how like powerful, you know, giving +1 strength to guard is pretty good. Now, the flip side for guard isn't actually all that bad. Amazing, right? Because you know, a lot of the time, if you give like a power sword, you know, Marines are often, you know, I like using Marines as a baseline. Marines are strength 4 anyway. Giving them a +1 strength power sword doesn't make them any better at wounding our infantry. They're still wounding them on 3s. So that's good for us. Bad thing again, seeing a trend here, meaning putting them on strength 5 means they can finally start wounding those Leman Russers in combat on 5s. And then if they are Blood Angels, that's wounding Leman Russers on 4s. Those, we've all seen it happen on this channel many times. Those Death Company have just gone from wounding my Leman Russers on 5s to wounding them on 4s with power swords. Ugh! That is bad, man. Those Death Company are going to tear my Leman Russers apart. Which is pretty crazy. The other thing, just to mention, is that apparently Astartes grade chainswords wielded by both Space Marines new and old will be hitting at AP -1. So that kind of sucks. Why, you know, it should be a universal upgrade for everyone. It kind of sucks that only Astartes are getting -1 chainswords across the board. Honestly, bit of a rant here. I liked how at the beginning of 8th edition, you know, a chainsword was a chainsword no matter, you know, a weapon, you know, a bolter was a bolter no matter what. You know, you had the Primaris ones, but a basic bolter was a bolter no matter what. A chainsaw was a chainsaw no matter what. And it was easy. Now, it really depends what faction you are, depends on if you get some sort of, ooh, you get a slightly better bolter, or a slightly better chainsword. I mean, an example of this is, you know, a bolter in the hands of a Sister of Battle or a Guardsman is a strength 4 AP -1 weapon. That same gun in the hands of a Marine is AP -1 in the tactical doctrine, and can fire double shots at long range. It's the same gun, but in the hands of a certain model, a certain faction, it's a totally different weapon. It's getting more shots. It's getting better AP. And it's the same with these chainswords now. I think that we shouldn't be... I think... And again, this is something that I've sort of come to love from playing other games outside of 40k now. Like, you know, in Lord of the Rings, a sword is a sword, an axe is an axe, a two-handed axe is a two-handed weapon. Like, they're the same across... You know, everyone has access to bigger swords or big... You know, everyone has access to swords. Everyone has access to axes. Everyone has access to two-handed weapons. Doesn't matter which army you are part of, it is the same weapon in everyone's hands. Okay? Bolt action. A rifle is a rifle. Doesn't matter if it's a Kar 98, a Mosin Nagant, you know, or anything. It's just, you know, it's just a rifle is a rifle, an SMG is an SMG. And what I don't like in 40k is this faction can have better chainsaws than this faction. It's the same weapon. It's exactly the same weapon, but this faction gets it better. I don't like that. I think all that's happening is there's an increase in complexity, which instantly creates an increase in difficulty of trying to balance the game. So I don't like the... All chainswords should be AP -1. That should be what I'm trying to say. And that is it, guys. So they have... That's what we know so far. They have said that all weapons will be getting a look. All weapons will be getting a look. So I know some people will say, well, what about the autocannon now? Because the autocannon to heavy bolter, the heavy bolter just looks better. We'll have to see what happens with the autocannon. We don't know yet. Will they be changing basic weapons? Will the las gun get an increase? I doubt it. I think a lot of weapons are gonna stay the same. I think special weapons are kind of getting a look in more than anything else. Like, you know, the plasma, the melter, the power source, that kind of stuff. I think they're really getting a look in. You know, the example of even Necrons is like the synaptic disintegrator and the like Rod of the Covenant. You know, they're getting a look in. It's special weapons that get a look in. I would be very surprised if they boosted the las gun in any way. I mean, I want them to, but I would be very surprised if they did. So it looks like heavy weapons, not small arms, are getting a big boost. So it's all about the special and heavy weapons spam this edition, guys, I guess. Anyway, hope you've all enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. Please put lots and lots of comments down in the comment section below. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.